There you go. If you can, you can switch view. View. You should be able to click on that. Click on that window. Okay. Here we go. Good morning and welcome. We are the Program and Services Standing Committee of the Community Advisory Board that falls under the Community Corrections Partnership. Let's set the table, members, and for those in the audience, with some housekeeping items. For those in the public, please keep your participation on mute. And for those on the phone, if you have any individuals, use *6 to mute and unmute. We'll hear comments first from the board and then from the public by raising your hand. And our purpose is to advance justice, reinvestment, and protect community investment.
We'll do roll call now.
Yes. First
Okay.
of all, we'll start off with roll call.
Okay, so Ozzy Carter,
Here.
Latanya Thompson,
Yes. And Raymond Moore. Here.
we have a quorum, so all board members are present.
Thank you for that. We'll now introduce our staff and others.
Okay, so I am Monique Tate. I'm with the Office of Reentry and Justice, and I support the CAB advisory boards.
I'm Janet Evans, and I am with the Contra Costa County Office of Education, doing the reentry program game plan for success inside the jails.
Jill Ray, Office of Supervisor Candace Anderson. Thank you all for being here. Next item is announcements.
Safe Return Project is currently taking applications for the Richard Boyd Fellowship. We'll be taking applications until March 19th. It's a great opportunity for anybody who's in reentry. They teach you how to do community organizing and teach about state government, risk factors, and dealing with trauma, a whole bunch of stuff. So if anyone's interested, you could apply at Safe Return Project or SafeReturnPRJ.org. So it's SafeReturnPRJ.org.
Thank you.
We also have Christina Jackson on. She might want to introduce herself too.
Yes, we have members virtually that would like to introduce themselves in our audience.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Christina Jackson, also in the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Good morning. Next item on the agenda will receive public comment on any item under the jurisdiction of the Community Advisory Board and not on this agenda. Hearing none. We'll move to our next item on the agenda. It is the approval of the minutes from the February 16th, 2023 Program and Services Subcommittee meeting. We take a moment and review the action. And after reviewing, the floor is open for a motion for approval.
motion for approval. I'm not sure how you word it, but
There's a motion submitted by Rena for approval of an action from our previous last board meeting, program and services, March 16th. Is there a second? Second. A second from Latanya. Now do a roll call for approval. Me? Okay, sorry.
Ozzy Carter,
Carter,
Yes,
Latanya Thompson,
Rena Moore.
yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to our next item on the agenda. And that is to complete our discussion with our policy, with our program services, survey questions. It's attachment 2, pages 7 through 9. And the first one is county agencies and CBO providers. We take a look at the verbiage. We went over that last meeting. Want to go back and we fine tune it to make sure that it is standing with our approval. Item B is the in custody participants, which we at our previous meeting decided that it would be beneficial to get the input from those in custody in order to see what services would best suit them upon release. First of all, let's take a look at our CBO and provider survey question. Take a look if there's any additional information or any verbiage that we'd like to redress. Floor is open. Okay, Jill.
Item number 3, the regions. Orinda, Lafayette, and Moraga are listed as South Central, and they're really central. The south part of the county goes from Alamo down through. Vermont. Orinda, Lafayette, Moraga should be moved up to B. We usually just call it South County, not South Central. It should list Alamo, Danville, San Ramon, etc.
Is that fit by our record keepers? Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Jill, for that input. One of the things that I was kind of reviewing as I went over this, the list of some of the things that, I thought might be additional benefit. And, one of the things that I don't see here is there anything restorative justice related or anything, reunification, family reunification, because family reunification is always real difficult challenge for parents, both male and female, and also restorative justice involvement. And we can look at restorative justice kind of like a double prong, because while we need CBOs providing that those types of services, restorative justice comes in several different types of buckets. And restorative justice initially for the crime committed could probably be something that could be facilitated, CBOs and what have you. But also restorative justice participation is also something that in custody to be looked at, because restorative justice is not only the victim and the perpetrator, but also the community. And when we have individuals returning from jail into the community, that's another type of culture shock, because they're coming out labels, stigma, with other issues, maybe PTSD, incarcerated, and other issues. So I think restorative justice is a piece that at some juncture, we need to look at organizations who are providing those services, both in custody and when returning home. So the task is how that can be manipulated within our areas, critical areas of need. Any suggestions?
A lot of times when they're in, they have done damage to the immediate family and they don't know how to restore it. And so they may be more quicker and amped to go back to a lifestyle that caused them to be in jail. So I think having that support to be able to rebuild not only the damage they did to community, but within their home would help reduce the chances of them re-entering to jail without support system. I think it's important that we should look at it.
Yeah, I agree. And with the restorative justice piece, that piece is really intricate because it brings all the parties involved for discussion and gives everyone voice and gives everyone advocacy. So the question is now how we can and what we can say surrounding that within our providers and CBOs.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I hear what you're saying, and I also see it fall into the buckets that's listed here. And I'm just curious if pro-social is a common term that those incarcerated would necessarily understand what that means. Under what is the most critical area of need?
For number H.
Yeah, H, 2H under the incarcerated and the 4H under the other one. Is I know from a CBO perspective, perhaps they would understand what pro-social means. And community supports. You know, family reunification used to be part of some of the questions, and I'm not sure where, you know, it seems to me that falls under that, and also PTSD falls under mental health supports. So I'm just wondering if maybe it's more of a language issue on this versus missing.
Possibly. Thank you, Jill, for that. It's language, probably my language.
No, you're I mean, you're pointing out the fact that, you know, that maybe mental health support / PTSD goes in there so that people, they think it's probably common. PTSD is common understanding of that at this point in time, but I'm not sure like pro-social is. So, yeah, it might be that just changing the verbiage a little bit to incorporate what you're trying to do in both of those areas. But family reunification always used to be part of this, so I'm just curious if
Where
it
they're
just
actually putting it.
was a language change, perhaps, because to me that's pro-social, right? How do you reintegrate back into society, whether it's your family or the community?
And if I'm hearing you correctly, Jill, the pro-social, we have to be deciphered by the specific CBO, their terminology and what they are presenting or providing, and it might not specifically fit around restorative justice.
Right, that's a sort of a separate issue, because that oftentimes fits into a different versus reentry, right? So like in
Like we have a whole category of restorative justice that we're doing with our youth. And it
It's sort of almost diversion away from the incarceral system. So how do we do it in the adult world? How do we do, or do we, are we doing restorative justice in the adult detention system?
I think there are things that happen in the detention system that would fall under that, but it's not necessarily
A program,
correct. And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the side of that.
right?
Yeah, and I brought some stuff today that I wanted to share with the group too, so you all can see and know what is happening in the jail. Especially if you're gonna be asking them, what are their needs, that we know ahead of time, what they have access to.
Right, thank you. Right, so that may be a separate question that you want to create is restorative justice question, and I don't know how that would be created or where you would put that. But in my view, in my understanding, it's a different thing than this. Like, what is the most critical area of need for you after release? Restorative justice would happen long before then.
So maybe that might not be appropriate, maybe so more appropriate for the in custody survey.
But the question is, what is the most critical area of need for you after release? Right? Because this is reentry focused about what can be housed in the community to support them. And I think restorative justice is an important discussion, but does it fit into what is going on with these surveys?
Right, it doesn't really, it doesn't fit, it was just one of my, brain spurts, because being involved with the district attorneys, NPR.
Yeah.
Neighborhood restorative.
Which is a diversionary program, right? Yeah, that doesn't touch this.
Right, but restorative justice, as a circle keeper, I understand the different types of circles and what they're beneficial for. And how each circle, there's probably 4 different types. Each circle has its significance, one with the perpetrator and the victim. They have one with the community that brings the perpetrator back into the community with a sense of belonging and a sense of advocacy. And that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, so that that piece can be integral in our challenges to try to get that part of it. Because I know our predecessors that correct people before us, specifically Lila, was a champion for restorative justice. And I don't know what vein she came to as far as advocacy, but I definitely want restorative justice someplace, but I would definitely benefit from assistance in how to see that show up in our the things that we're looking for as program services, because this is where it happens. This is where we're looking at organizations, and I don't really know which organizations currently. I know Rubicon is where Lila was attached to. I don't know which of the organizations currently even provide restorative justice circles or things of that.
Sure,
Success Center is the one I know that does.
Yeah, the Reentry Success Center.
And Richmond, they're the only ones that I know that do.
Would be a good place to start asking that question. Aside from this.
Community West are they part of our Community
Well,
West?
Rubicon has got the contract for the Reentry Success Center, so then they
Okay.
subcontract.
Okay,
They provide space in there for other groups.
okay. Thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
It's a lot to kind of like wrap your head around to understand the whole process, but I think it's good to have these discussions because our leadership should. And as we continue on, we have to make sure that all these things, because next year, we still have to leave a trail and a path for others to kind of like pick up on, because we'll never complete all the things that we have, because it's just totally impossible. Meeting and the time it takes to get on an agenda for the main cab, but just to kind of start talking about it so that we don't forget, it doesn't get lost with other issues that we're dealing with. So we had time, has everyone had time to look over the prior year survey questions and the recommended changes? We have one update. Jill gave us, or as item C on number 20. And better understanding pro-social and community supports. Something I'm gonna have to research and try to better understand what that includes and how each of the CBOs respond to that.
In regards to family unification, are there any agencies that we're currently using? And is there any training someone could take online or in person to have a better understanding of what's actually being offered?
So Center Force is the agency in our county that holds the 9 contract for family reunification services. And they do the entire county, not just one area.
Okay.
Consider for
Center Force.
I'd like to add to that too. They do a really good job of
Yes.
allowing you to sit in. I've sat in a few of their sessions. So yes, they're really open to bringing people in and explaining their process.
Okay. And they start in custody. They don't wait until people get out. Good to know.
So Monique, is this something that we're ready to approve if there are not any additional suggestions?
What I would suggest is that we'll share that information through ORJ, and then I would update it and then bring it back for you to actually approve it. Exactly how you want it to look, the final. So, yeah. I mean, if that's okay with you all. So, yeah.
Were there any other suggestions for the provider service question? That's fine. So moving on to the in custody. So we're gonna have to do an update as well for South County.
Yes, so I noted the changes for that Jill mentioned.
I do have one concern, and that's the in custody population. Pro-social and community supports, we might need to break that down. Be more specific. I wouldn't understand that. Yeah, I agree. I've been there. I wouldn't have, like, what does that mean?
We'll bring it back on the next draft and we'll elaborate on it.
Okay, so we're gonna move away from that?
It's up to you. I mean, we'll make sure we put a description on there to what it actually means for, so that it could be clearly. Is that the will of the committee?
One of the things I wanted to make sure that it was specific, and correct me if I'm incorrect, making sure that family unification is highlighted there. I want to make sure too that there's some type of ways, I'm still with the restorative justice piece, conflict resolution, because that has to, coming from a jail of incarceration, posturing, or at least you have so many things that have transpired, but more often than not, you don't have relationships built because you're in custody, you're trying to reestablish yourself. And I wanted to make sure, this is my vantage point, you know, it's just not we have to really agree on it, whether or not, how we want to spell it out, where people in custody can really understand what we're asking. And the simplifying. it, my suggestion.
I agree. It's really important that they understand.
So I think that what we can do is, the issues that you presented, we can elaborate more and include those items in the list. And then when I bring it back, it'll be a new draft with the items that you have, asked to elaborate on. So it'll be easier for people to understand specifically what we offer and what is listed. And Patrice, I don't know, Patrice has joined us. I don't know if you want to add anything to what they mentioned that they would like to see on the provider questions. They'd like to see that restorative justice and family reunification be listed under number 4 as the most critical area.
Oh, the listing, okay, okay.
And they asked about the pro-social. It was brought to our attention that that might not be a term that is easily understood by anyone, people. It might not be a general term that, so they would like for us to elaborate to spell it out exactly what that means.
Okay, so for that one, wait, let me make note real quick. So we said restorative justice. And what was the other?
Family reunification.
Yeah, oh, those are good ones.
And we had a discussion prior to restorative justice may not be something free, but something separate to be discussed. Because it could either be diversionary or it has to be.
Right, okay. Okay, so now going back to the option of, or selecting the pro-social community supports. I think I heard last time about that in terms of critical need is essentially a support system for the individual that sometimes being even placed outside of their normal environment is an area of critical need. So that's where it kind of landed in terms of the term. I do know that there are providers who are familiar with that, but if you have recommendations or suggestions on maybe other ways of restating it so it's a little bit more clear, I'm happy to make that adjustment.
We talked about the CBOs may understand that, but this is for the incarcerated population. They may not understand.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong, okay, the second one, the in-custody survey.
Yes.
Got you. Okay, so then the restorative justice and family reunification piece, was that also for the in-custody survey question listing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we want them in both, but the pro-social community supports, we might want to rename that for the in-custody one, is what I'm hearing. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I'm you guys off track here.
And Ozzy also mentioned like PTSD, rather than include that with mental health, because that's maybe more familiar.
So that could be something where when we say mental health support, I could do again, like in a not paragraph, but within parentheses, i.e. PTSD, other common disorders that we are familiar with, anxiety, depression, things like that. So it's they clue in on
I think that would make it, so that they understand and resonates with it.
yeah. So whether it is a acute issue or even something that's a little not as severe, they can identify with it. Now, Janet, not to throw us off too much. Now, Janet conducts some of the, she conducts a needs assessment as she's doing the pre-release planning in the jails. How in areas like this, such as do you have a supportive or a good support system, or in identifying like the mental health, how well do folks, well, what's the question around that, if you recall, generally speaking, and then how do you respond to that question?
So on our intake forms, which is the same form most of the AB 109 community providers use as well. The question is around, it's like a checkbox. Do you have a support system? Yes or no? How many are part of your support system? And we ask for a number, and then we say who is a part of your support system, and then we ask, do they live nearby? In the area, or are they away from here? So then we get that. I would say 50% of the people answer that question. But then in module 2, when we do all of our assessments, that's where the questions come up about substance use, mental health, some of the other things that help us work with them about what to do while they're in custody. And then that one, everybody fills out. And I've shown the data to a bunch of people. It's a very high number of people who have the mental health. Mhm. And they're open about it. That question is also on the intake form, but some of them won't do it on the intake, but then they'll do it on ours.
Why do you think so? Do you think it's the phrasing of the question or who's giving it?
So
It could be that too.
it's possible it's the wording, but I think when they first fill out the intake form, they're kind of like, well, why do you need this information?
Mhm.
So then when they get to our second module, we're talking to them about why this assessment information is important for them to be successful and ready for transition back to the community. They're a bit more open to answering that question more honestly, because now they know that we're there to help connect them to the right service,
Okay,
to help them be successful in that transition.
okay. So maybe restating it as a support system. That's all I got. Can't think of anything else, yeah. With that,
I can attest, probably just thinking back, initially not really wanting to label themselves. And then after getting acclimated, understanding that could be something that will really help them in their stabilizing, to really be honest. Okay. So, is there any other addition that we can make, or are we at a point where we're ready to send it back, come back again for approval? I think that's the next process.
Submitted to the others to review the mail for us to, after they reviewed it, to come back and approve it.
Actually, today's, as we go around, it's recorded, notes are being made on what suggestions. And once it goes back to ORJ staff, it will come back at our next meeting for a final record of action or approval. Today, we're making the final tweaks. Correct, Monique?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And then I also understand it to be that these are recommendations that you're, well, this would go on the final survey, right? This is part of your survey. Now, this is not the complete survey, though, is it? Is it just simply the questions for in custody? Because you have other components, or is this it? Because I missed the meeting last month.
so we started talking about the possibility of creating a separate survey from their traditional annual survey with CBO, all AB 109 funded providers, county and CBOs. And this one would be more of an in custody survey to participants. And so we're creating the questions right now to be reviewed. And probably the next step is really talking through the process of how we can actually make that happen and circulate the survey inside and how we will collect it and things like that. So that's a whole other element to it. But what I would suggest in terms of process going forward from here, if the committee would like, you all can decide now that based on the changes that you stated, you can, was this a action item? Did we have it on here as an action item? I don't think so. I don't think we did. But you said it doesn't matter.
No, as long as it's on the agenda, I think.
Okay, so in that case, you guys can take a vote if you want to and say, you know, we're moving forward with these questions with the stated changes that we talked about today. And then for your report out for the big CAB meeting is where you can present to the full body of the questions that you guys made edits to, that this is the one that you'd like to move forward with, want to get feedback from the full body, and then also present to them the idea that you all have about circulating an in-custody survey and sharing those questions as well. And so we would update these questions and attach it to your report out and include it as part of the full body agenda. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay.
But the other piece of that is, once we present it and implement, it goes, that's the process that we have to figure out how to get it into the jail.
Yeah, so we'll need to likely reach out to, I'll probably reach out to Jody Seekeneter over at the sheriff's office to see if it's a possibility and share with her the questions that you guys have come up with and see how she can maybe work with us and or CAP about how we can circulate it, the time frame around it, things of that nature. So we can maybe start at least to get a few more details. Now, did you guys have a certain time frame in mind where or when and how quick of a turnaround you wanted survey responses? Because that's also going to dictate process as well.
So Latonya, this is your baby.
So what, it would be nice if we could have it implemented prior to the vendors, agencies completing their portion. So that if there's additional things that we're asking or needing of them, that they could take this in consideration, that this is what your client base is saying that they need. And are you able to provide that? That was my thinking.
So I'm hearing you correctly that you would like to see this survey going out prior to the survey from the CEOs. So that means generally this, the questions in the past have gone out. I'm Monique, I'm gonna meet you on this one.
I think it went out in July.
Line.
Yeah. No, actually, I think it was a little earlier than that.
Okay,
We had Christina present in July.
okay.
So usually the April CCP meeting, so here's the other piece to it too. CCP doesn't have an official schedule yet.
And it has to be approved by.
Well, what has happened in the past is that we usually make an announcement during the CCP meeting, the April CCP meeting, to say, hey, guys, it's survey time again. We'll be sending out a survey to you. Please make sure you respond. That's what contributed to the higher number of responses last year. Because Chief made a point to make sure that we engage folks as early as possible to give them the heads up. So when we start bugging you, you know why. So that took place in April. I want to say we then may have collected responses either April, May. I want to say somewhere in that time frame. And then we gave our data team some time to comb through all the information, put it together to then present. And I believe we presented to CAB first. No, we presented to Programs and Services Subcommittee first, then the full CAB, and then later to CCP. So you're in terms of the chain of presentations, we're looking at somewhere between July and September timeframe where those presentations were happening. And this was then all gearing up toward your budget requests and policy recommendations for the CCP's November budget workshop. And I know it's a lot, but don't worry, we'll keep you on track.
Technically, what I'm hearing is we're kind of behind. But like
In a way, but it's not totally, everyone's behind. Let me just say it that way. It's not just simply CAB. It's, you know, you also don't know the full schedule for CCP just yet to even plan around those dates as well. So, and to be quite honest with you, you know, with the report that you have, is much going to change because we're going to ask them the same questions essentially as we did the year prior. So that's also something to consider. Are you going to gain any new knowledge when you do these, when you do this survey with those agencies? Now, you will get new information, obviously, for surveying folks that are in custody, which I do think is the missing piece. So I'm glad you guys are pushing for that. But all to say, you know, in terms of process, that might be something you want to weigh as well.
So with that being said, thank you.
Decisions, I know.
That might not be feasible with us doing the jail first. And then the CBO, waiting on the CBO, just because the time. Okay. But one thing that I would like though to see. Question, when we go back to the CCP and give them a report of our survey. Making sure that when we go back, we have both the surveys in, and so we won't know until CCP begins scheduling. But that's gonna look like.
Yeah. So let's say we do typically know that there's a meeting in April, and there is a tentative schedule date for that. And then usually there's a June meeting, and then there's a September meeting, and there's a November and December. November and December are basically the budget meetings, right? So you can tentatively schedule a process between now and, let's say you wanted to have survey results back in time to present maybe at a September meeting. Yeah,
Ideally.
ideally.
Because in October, the budget documents come out, and in
Mhm.
November, the first budgets are submitted. So you want them to have the information before they do their budgets.
And you can't do it. June is too soon.
To present to
No,
CCP
to get
budget.
everything, yeah, to present by June. Is it, we don't have enough?
It's not too soon, but it might be a rush timeline for collecting the responses and then doing the analysis of it to then present. So,
September would be safe.
And you want
Yeah.
June because you want to push the stragglers. You want the opportunity at CCP to
yeah,
make
to
another
remind people
announcement
again.
to push those last
In June.
stragglers.
Mhm.
That's a good game.
Okay.
Thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream, that's right.
And I thank you for Tanya too for bringing that forward. I think that was just, teamwork. That's true. And that's really a missing piece because those are the individuals that we're on task to serve and make sure that they have the services. So we need to really hear. And I'm optimistic about us moving futuristically to doing a tour. Things that we talked previously out. Full one. So moving on. Is there any other language that we need to take a look at before we go on to our work plan? Okay. Moving on to item number 5. This is our 2023 work plan, and that's on pages 10 and 11. Item 1. There's several items that are bulleted. Have we reviewed those bulleted points and looked at anything that you would like to take ownership for? And we can always, put 2 people. Not limited to 1. So everyone can participate, but just to kind of like get some ownership of which ones you specifically want to advocate for. I know for myself, I definitely as far as my commitment to the full body, to continue going to external boards, specifically for me, Measure X CAB. And if there's some specifics that we'd like to advocate for, go on record,
Housing resources from.
housing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Also, put myself down for implicit bias training for CAP and board members. And then I can do the ADA compliance for CEO. Okay, and
I also don't mind, doing the, restorative justice within the county.
okay. I'm also gonna go help with the ADA compliances, and I think all of us probably could seek out CBOs to do some presentations for them. For full panel. We are currently involved in developing the survey. And we're pretty much in that, and next board we will hopefully finalize. Will update us where we are, and also noting that the CCP meeting that will be presenting at hopefully will be September, so that we will have all of our surveys returned. I did like the idea of the incarcerated individuals, their survey first, but it's kind of might be a little convoluted how that's going to work out. But that was a great idea. So our target month is going to be September to get everything finalized, which means our surveys out to the CBOs, our surveys returned, analyzed, which the analyzing comes back to
your committee, to full cap and just
but who analyzes?
our office,
Analysts. And that's Denise.
between Denise and Christina, more likely than not.
We have a September.
So when do you want to have it out analyzed and returned by us so that we can present in September?
Well, first thing, the surveys will be returned to us, finalized with the verbiage and become a record of action next month, the next month's committee meeting, subcommittee meeting. And then that's next month is April, so May.
We're gonna analyze it too? And
Oh, that's gonna take, it has to be.
Yeah.
returned.
So if you see here on your work plan, for the timeline, I think we have it kind of generally, mapped out that, the survey will be finalized by April, which we're kind of on track for right now. Give folks a 2-week response period in May. So, ideally send it out between the end of April, early May. And then you'll give us some time in June to, do the analysis of the responses.
That's when it goes.
Mhm. So do you want now we could try, well, because we need to have a conversation with the sheriff's office about the in-custody survey to actually get it circulated inside. So it likely won't follow the same timeline. It will be somewhat adjusted. So if the idea is to have presentation on the findings of both at the same time, let's say by September. Let's talk about Sheriff's Office first. Yeah, I don't want to prematurely state a time frame when I don't really know what lift that would be, because that's also meaning that we're serving more people, you know, keep that in mind. We're talking about 3 facilities, all 3 of which is, what's the ADA there on at this time, COVID. Is it as high as like 1,500?
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
About 1,300, okay. And obviously not everyone is going to respond, but let's say a good quarter of those folks do respond. That's going to take a lot more time for staff to, you know, go through, and more likely than not, they'll be paper surveys. They're not able to administer anything electronically unless someone was there collecting the information. And then, well, I don't know. So anyway, it's those kind of details that have to be worked out and will dictate the time frame.
The other thing to keep in mind is not everybody's held.
Right.
Right, so you have a rotating.
You have a
So you
rotating.
have some people that are just being held till they bond out or. So. There'll be a smaller number of people who are there. With return.
So I can, when we talk to Jody, we can maybe also get a sense of strategy wise, to at least get a good pool of responses. Should we just only like survey, for example, Marsh Creek, which all those individuals are sentenced. So they're serving a significant amount of time. Do we go through schools or detention health? Who sees everyone that's booked? Detention health does. You know, what's the best strategy to go where you can get at least a good, you know, subset of responses?
So from your personal experience, how do you feel the sheriff will be receptive to this process?
I think so. And I think because we're being very upfront about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to collect. They've worked with both the Reentry Network and the center to circulate the Voices newsletter, for example, that was pushed forth through CAP's budget, you know, so I don't think we'll get any pushback. I think they will support us. Where there may be challenged is, okay, how we're going to do it, who's going to circulate it, who's going to collect it, what's the, you know, all of those logistical things. But I don't think that they would be like,
There won't be an issue of what's
No.
in the survey
yeah,
about sharing information like that.
yeah,
It's just the logistical. like
Yeah.
Patrice is saying.
yeah.
And we have enough CEOs, individuals that are in the jail that might kind of help pick up some of the,
Potentially, that's why I'm saying we may have to ask them, who do they, so Jody Sickaneder is Director of Inmate Services, is that the right title? So she actually administers and coordinates all of those in custody providers. So she'll be the best to know whether or not we should go through a specific agency, which is what I'm mentioning, either detention health, the schools, or one of the CBOs that's in there. Or if she'll say, you know, maybe we could have our deputies that's on certain module here or there or whatever that could do that for us. It would depend on how she feels due to the jail operations, what works best.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I just want to let us be mindful that as a recorded meeting, we want to probably identify ourselves. And I think once you're already engaged in the conversation, you know, but initially when you're talking. So like I'm Monique Tate, you know, and so I'm announcing that some of the conversation is hard to detect. We have a new sound system, so maybe it might be easier over time. But as long as we identify who we are at the beginning of the conversation, I think that's helpful. And I do have a comment to make. So in the work plan, we need to add the in custody questions as part of the conduct survey, right? Because that's another component of the overall annual survey, right? So we have to update it. Okay, all right, I'll make sure I do that as well.
Is there any additional questions or input on our surveys? So the next item on our work plan is program and service qualitative data collection. And well, that's what we're talking about currently. That would be the survey. The second item, look at local and regional needs, assessment to reentry populations. And it includes surveying the local cabs. That's something we're going to also assign with our subcommittee individuals to take on that task.
This is Monique, is that for ORJ or is that for your members?
It's for our members.
Oh,
And
okay.
whether or not
sorry.
that's something, it's on page 11. The qualitative data collection. This is something that happens when we have to present this at CCP, is that correct, Monique?
As far as surveying other cabs? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, excuse me, backing back up to conduct the qualitative interviews. That's something that's already being done when we submit our survey questions to the CPOs.
Correct.
And then that information, we translate that and share that with CCP, correct?
Yes.
Is
Mhm.
that something that we do in person or just a brief is included?
You,
So, no, so this is something separate. This was initially CAB's interest in just learning more about the individual CBOs and to do like site visits or interviews directly with them. So it's not necessarily something you would present to CCP. It's more informing CAB about the programs that essentially you're promoting to be funded. And again, it all goes back to informing your recommendations that you may want to push for during budget time. And then the local and regional needs assessment surveying local cabs. This came out of the last programs and services subcommittee last year, where folks were interested in learning about other similar community advisory boards in different counties. How are they doing their work? You know, is there some synergy between what Contra Costa is doing versus maybe what San Francisco and yada yada. So I believe a couple of members actually attended some of those meetings. Most of them are held virtual. Well, I don't know. Now that we're all in person again. Well, members of the public, you can still probably join virtually. So that's where those pieces came from. Just getting a general sense of how things work in other jurisdictions.
Okay, so this is something that is a legacy that was left for us and how we would like to proceed for this year. Is there any input that either of you would like to offer?
We assign a team to attend this.
If someone would like to.
Which one would I be attending, like in San Francisco or Alameda or,
Choose whichever one you would like.
um,
Has thrown me off, and forgive me, was the qualitative. Because if you're, it becomes quantitative, isn't it? Because if you're going, it's not specifically, you're not going crunching numbers, you're going to listen and bring back information and be quantitative, not qualitative.
So for example, the survey itself, would be considered a quantitative, method, if you will, of gathering information versus the site visits or the interviews with folks. Yeah, that would be more qualitative because you can get a general sense or of, it's not so black and white with the numbers, so to speak. You can gather more information from that.
Okay. There is one thing that I would like to interject here is as far as visiting CBOs and having them come and present. But I threw out guys the last meeting to actually, visit some of the CBOs to see how they're conducting business and what a day there looks like. And I'm open to visit. You have to know what the protocol is. I heard you just can't pop in.
I mean, not the pop-ups, yeah, just respectful of people's time, because they got business operating.
Right.
So, actually, you can combine what you're doing around the disability work with your site visits and interviews with folks. So one of your interview questions could simply be a little bit more broader than whether or not your facility is ADA compliant, but just what supports do you have in place for any of your clients that have specific disabilities? And then they can share with you the things that they do, or maybe they may very well share what's lacking and what they would actually need greater support in. So that's the kind of information gathering you'll be doing in that regard.
Well, I'd like to make a suggestion. And I'll lead by example. Maybe we could take upon ourselves, and it could be as easy as maybe where you were employed, to come back and do a report out to program and services, or maybe getting a presentation to full cab or the CBOs that, receive our AB 109 funding and have them come in and present, get on the agenda, and then have them presented to full cab. And I definitely am an advocate for going to visit the CBOs. And as I said, leading by example, I will go through the protocol process of setting up an appointment. I'll find a CBO in my area. There's a lot of them, several. And I'll make that appointment and then I'll go. And for me, I think that each of us might want to do that. Maybe two in 2023 that you'd like to come back and report out to, or have them present, and then that gives us the opportunity to have it presented full cab. But our visitation would be to kind of like offer the information that we're currently speaking on, to report directly within program service.
We actually visit, this is Latonya Thompson. So when we actually visit the location, the purpose is to address the wheelchair and the ADA portion of it. And when they present at the academy, what will be the purpose of that? Is it to educate us about their services or to elaborate on the ADA?
So can I interject real quickly? So what I would recommend is that let's use I'm trying to think of one of the organizations. Let's use Center Course, for example,
Okay.
who has a family reunification program that's funded through AB 109. You can it will help support you in this. You can submit send an email to their program manager, say, hey, we're members of CAB, we'd love to come and check out your program in action, like to learn a little bit more about it, and also set some time to interview you To just get, it'll be like an informational interview to get more information about your program and some other questions that, that we may have. I would say, with regards to and you can ask questions that are aligned with some of the policy recommendations that you have, but there is some overlap there. And then in regards to the questions around disability, again, I would keep it a little bit more broader, that when you have individuals, let's continue with the example of center force. When you have clients that you're serving that either they have a disability or in the context of family reunification, where members of that family or that's a support system to that client also has a disability and have needs, how do you support that? Or in what ways do you need support in order to support that if that is an occurrence among your clientele? So there's ways you could frame questions to still get the answers that you're looking for, as well as other things that you might be interested in, such as, how many families have you served? What's the general outcome of situations where maybe you provided support to a family that has an open family case, let's say, for example. I'm just throwing things out there. But depending on what agency you want to visit or program, we can help you craft out some interview questions that you could take with you. But you can certainly email them, say, hey, we'd love to schedule some time to come tour your facility or tour your program, see it in action. And if there's some time available, can we speak with staff to learn a little bit more? And I think that in most programs, most of these agencies have experienced that from other types, like they have funders that come in and do those kind of site visits, right? So you guys are no exception in that regard. They're accustomed to that sort of process or protocol, if you will, and will be amenable to that.
And if I could just piggyback on that, so it's a very fine line between, finding out more about the program and their needs, because there's always the question of, what can we do better? What would benefit our population, that sort of thing. And a watchdog agency that's looking for ADA compliance. And so you have to be very careful with that because that's not the role of CAB to ensure that wheelchairs can make it and all of that. They have their own agencies and their own inspection protocols that they go through from the state level and the county level. So I think approaching it from the way Patrice was saying versus measuring to see if they have curbs and enough width, that's overreaching the goals of this, more meeting can you meet the needs of this population and what would help you meet the needs if you can right now versus ensuring ADA compliance. That's in county speak and state speak, that's a whole
Can of worms.
a whole
That's a technical.
yeah. So we just have to be careful that it's not cross into that area.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say, and everyone input, we probably need to formulate a script of questions that are comfortable questions to pose to the CBOs that we're visiting, so that we don't cross any of those legal boundaries and go beyond what we're doing, because that's something else. We really want to find out how they're serving our population, and that's our primary concern.
More of a question. Do we have a list of those CBOs? Are you going to run funding?
Yes.
So what do you think about the possibility of us going and visiting the CBOs? Is that something you'd be ready to do?
It's a great idea. It gives us the opportunity to be visible and also to connect with the CBOs and establish a relationship.
Can you think of offhand of CBO that you would like to visit?
I'm familiar with Rubicon, so I don't know if any offhand. That's what I was saying about the list. If you guys would like.
So I can tell you real briefly, we have Lao Family Community Development provides AB 109 housing. Center Force, provides family reunification service. Rubicon does employment services. We have what we call our 2 reentry service hubs. They serve as like navigation hubs for different services, not only just reentry based, but then whatever else might be available that they have broker relationships for. And that's the Reentry Success Center, which is located in Richmond, and they are operated by Rubicon. And then the Reentry Network, which their office is located in Antioch, and they're operated by Health Right 360. And so the 2 serve multiple regions of the county. And Bay Area Legal Aid provides civil legal aid support. And then we also have Men and Women of Purpose, which provides peer mentorship in West County. I think I covered it.
And the only request I have is that I don't do men and women purpose because it'll be a conflict.
And then Center Force also contracts with the Reentry Network to provide gender-specific case management. So that's separate from their family reunification work.
Okay.
And so all of those I just named are all AB 109 funded, contracted community providers. Yeah.
I'd first like to go to the Laos, Center and Men and Women of Purpose. I could go to.
And I like center force. And I would like to do the gender portion of it as well. And then anything else that I'm comfortable with.
And Rena, you said Rubicon?
Men and Women of Purpose and the Lao family.
Okay, I'll take Reentry Network, Health Right 360.
I could do the, there's a Bay Area Legal. I messed that name up.
Very legal aid. You got it.
And I'll do Rubicon. And who has Reentry Success Center? That's under Rubicon.
Yeah, so they have 2 separate programs at the Success Center, and then they have their employment program. So Ozzy, I have you down with Rubicon. Do you want to take also the Success Center?
Sure. And Health Right 360. Reentry Network. Rubicon, Reentry Success Center, and Reentry Network.
I have a question. This is Monique. So are you all considering a hybrid type option, like virtually as well as maybe in person to do your site visits? Are you considering both options, in person and or virtually?
I was thinking about one in person.
To facilitate and to connect on their personal level.
Okay.
So would also our goal at those particular meetings to get a time, a commitment to present before the full cab? Or we need to come back and have a discussion for that after this.
I would prefer to come back only because it may seem like there was a hidden agenda, like we were coming for an ask versus to provide a service to them.
Okay.
Are we gonna come up with a script prior to? With questions?
With the question? Yes, we need a script. Question, can we work offline to come up with a script? Or do we need to establish the script now?
You can work offline, but just be cognizant of not 3 of you guys meeting together, because otherwise that's forum and that's a meeting. You know, and then if you would like, there's certain things that you guys want to put together and to us, and we can help kind of consolidate it and shoot it back out to you. We're more than happy to do that.
Excellent, thank you. And we could just get our list of questions and then submit them back let's get a time frame for that.
So are you suggesting that they might want to come up with some of the questions now?
Yeah.
And then you all can sort of fine tune it and then send it to them individually to give them
Mhm.
feedback?
Yeah, because each of them are seeing different agencies anyway, so the shaping of the questions may be based on that specific program, right? They're all not going to be the same. Well, there may be some general questions that are the same, but not all of them. So what I would say, what I would recommend is, you can certainly do some like online research of each of these organizations just to understand, like, you know, who they are holistically, their history and things like that. And then we can give you some information with respect to their specific AB 109 program. And then from there, craft what questions you might want to ask. And then if you need some feedback from us, say, hey, Teresa, Monique, can you take a look at this? We'll definitely do that, help fine tune it and.
I think that that's a great idea. I think we're moving right along in our process.
Great. Now, we do have partners and providers meetings. These are, so this is new for you guys. We, and we just have one scheduled actually on the 28th, March 28th, which is in a couple weeks, right? Less than that. And this is a convening of CBO organizations that are either AB 109 funded or are not, but they're serving the reentry population. And I'm sorry, not just CBOs, it's county representatives that are on there too. But these are mostly, it's bringing together the frontline staff and some of the program administrators there. So folks can network with one another. And then also the main question that always comes up for folks is, well, who's doing what and how do they do it? And so we provide space and time for folks to present on their program. So what I can do is look back at some of the old presentations and see, trying to think, Bayer Legal Aid didn't present yet. Salesforce present
Last year.
they presented last year. So, I don't think the program has deviated very much from there. Anyway, I'll look back at some of the old presentations and maybe we could send them out to you. So you can,
Would the meeting be held here on the 28th?
no, it'll be virtual. Yeah.
At 8, I had it at 8 a.m. Is it at
No, no. It's definitely not that early. It's at 10 a.m.
10? Okay.
As a matter of fact, I need to send out a reminder before this week is out, so folks will have that. And then typically include CAT members on those email alerts. So if you guys haven't gotten it.
I got it. I got it last week.
We're 11 weeks ago, yeah, okay. March 28th.
Okay, so if there are any questions or anything we need to go over to kind of like make sure that we've gotten everything as far as which of the organizations we're going to focus on. Yes, Monique.
So I just want to provide you with a time check. It's 12:18, but it looks like on your agenda, 6 and 7 are to be discussed, but that was already discussed. It may be incorporated and it should be incorporated into your work plan, I'm thinking. That's what it looks like to me.
Got it incorporated into the work.
Yeah. So, okay, all right.
Yes, so we kind of discussed program accommodations for individuals with disabilities. Kind of surf that. What that's gonna look like. This is Ozzy part of the talk. I keep forgetting. I think the greatest input that we got was that we're not really, we're not responsible for compliances, other than the fact that the organizations that receive AB 109 funding, we can ask questions around how can we support them in their accommodations for those who might have some ADA issues. And if they had any Monique.
And also, I think it's a legacy thing too, because of the past member, Dr. Hernandez. You know, being a part of CAB, she passed away, but she was a champion for, you know, the reentry population and servicing those with disabilities. So I think that's why that's kind of always at the forefront of CAB, and you all wanting to highlight that because she was a champion for it. That's what I recall.
Yeah, and I also remember that the conversation around this was not just limited to individuals with physical disabilities, but those experiencing disabling conditions that would, and that could be a range of things. That could be a mental health challenge. That could be a learning disability. That could be, it's a variety of things, and that those conditions, if not given the appropriate and proper support, would then leave an individual not being able to take full advantage in a lot of cases, any of the resources that would be available to them. Certainly when we push for economic security, let's say, for example, for individuals who are either justice system involved or formerly incarcerated. Well, if you're on fixed income due to a disability, sometimes the employment opportunities are going to be limited. So then what then, right? What other supports are available in order for the individual to have stable housing? Now, expensive housing is out there. So being on fixed income doesn't afford you very, very much. So I think if we move away necessarily from the focusing on whether or not, or I should say, keep it more broad is because you want to capture all of those pieces. You also want to know whether or not if an individual, if someone is coming in that has a learning disability, but let's say a core component of a particular program, I'm thinking, for example, let's say the Reentry Success Center has workshops. Well, are those workshops, do they take into account someone that may come in with a learning disability and their ability to capture or take in the information that's being given? Or Rubicon is doing a resume resume building type of exercise. And what, when things are coming up in those instances, again, what supports are there? Or maybe that hasn't been totally their experience yet, or maybe they have the supports in place, right? There's just a lot of unknowns that you're trying to gather information about. So on the concept or on the discussion around disability specifically, it's good to keep it as broad as possible, because I don't think CAB in the past, and certainly I would say even just in the reentry space, have we ever really targeted talking about disabilities in the way that you guys are going at it, which is a really good thing. I mean, we generally talk about substance use disorders and mental health needing to be, behavioral health, but to look at it holistically at the full range of disabling conditions that folks are dealing with within this population, I think is, it's timely for it. And I think it, at least we're just starting the conversation. So when you're posing these sort of questions, it will get folks to thinking about, what do we have right here? Or maybe all we do have is that we're ADA compliant. Like maybe that's all we really have in terms of folks who have physical disabilities, but did we consider some of these other elements?
So when we talk about or even mention like vision or hearing impaired, or would that be overstepping our boundaries?
No, again, keep it broad, just say disabilities more generally speaking, and then see what information they share with you.
Well, and then just to add to that, because when this originally came up, we've got the regional center, which is the regional center is a state funded agency to support those with identified disabilities. So then the question was, and I know I had a conversation with folks from we have a developmental disabilities council here in the county about how much do they know about the reentry services and is there crossover and how can those be accommodated? And so that was part of the early conversation. And I just, because the unfortunate passing of Dr. Hernandez, I don't think it went too much further, but understanding there's a whole host of resources for those who are identified. And so then it comes down to, again, this reentry population, number one, have they been identified? And if not, could they be identified? And then this vast amount of resources for this population, and it also crosses over into housing. And quite frankly, in our county, there isn't a whole lot of crossover that's happened in the past, and it's starting to meld between like behavioral health and the regional. Because they really are separate entities, one state, county. So it's about engaging in conversations with that group as well to make sure that we have this population knows the resources available to them on both sides, the state and the county.
Now, do they have the regional center, regional council center?
Regional center. There's a regional center, which is what it's called. Yes, state funded.
Do they have like a advisory body or
Developmental Disabilities
is that
Council.
the council? Okay. Maybe that could be one of the external meetings that you guys add to your list. Not that you need more, but if this is a particular interest to you, where you can, as Jill is saying, highlight even at those meetings about, that you guys are looking into it from this lens and wanting to learn more about the resources that
Because
are
it's
available.
not just physical disabilities.
Right.
Regional center is, anybody on the spectrum can qualify for services. So, there's a vast amount of resources there.
Yes, there is.
This is Janet Evans. In my past life, I worked for them for 8 years, for the regional center. So there is particular eligibility, and the disability had to take place when you were a minor. But if there's records that can prove that you meet a developmentally disabled definition as a minor, as an adult, you can still access this.
And I'm curious is there any barriers for folks who have a history of criminal, other incarceration or criminal conviction?
My guess is it's undiagnosed.
Probably. And they don't know how to advocate for themselves in regards to it.
Okay.
That brings up another question. In regards to the survey for those that are in custody, there's others, but do we want to put anything about identified disability? Or that, I'm not trying to give us more work, but as we're talking, it could play a part in it if they're not getting the resources they need when they get out. It can be more comfortable to go back to a familiar situation.
You can ask them if they're a regional center plan or receive SSDI.
This is Jana. We collect that data in our reentry program. If you would like it, I can give it to you. Our program is maybe 10% of the entire population in the jails, but we have felt over the years that it's an accurate representation of who's in the jail. So if you don't want to add that to your survey, I'm more than happy to just pull the data and give it to you. Yeah, we asked the question about developmental, physical disabilities. We ask if they're on SSDI, SSI. So I would have to work with Patrice's crew, but we could work together to pull that for you.
I think that information would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for this lively discussion. Contributions to moving forward to actually begin exercising our visibility within our CEOs and really communicating with them, getting information from them in very non-confrontational. Is there anything else that we need to discuss? Let's go back to our agenda. We have 1 minute left. I think we should probably go to our next step. This is Donzie Carter. For our next steps, first of all, we'll have our surveys returned, both the CBO and the in-custody surveys returned to do a final approval for our next meeting.
Monique, also I can update your work plan. You guys can vote on the final work plan, adding the additional items if you like. That could be a next step.
Okay, adding additional items, also adding responsible persons and resources for the different items that we highlighted at our meeting. And, I guess for our next, meeting, we can also do an update on our scripts for our, the CBOs as far as our visitation, what questions we will ask. And making sure that we get those, our individual questions to Monique or to Treats in order to have them for our next meeting, have them condensed, have something ready to go. And maybe also by the next meeting, have made contact and appointment for the CBOs that we've committed to. And in that same vein, possibly reaching out on our own to find out who the contact person might be that we need to get contact information from. Probably need to reach out to ORJ to get that information, but definitely when we meet next month, have that ready to go so we can share it with the committee. Is there anything else that we'd like to include in the next steps? If there are no other additions for next step, going around the room, any additions for next steps for our next meeting? Hearing none. It is now 12:33, and the meeting is officially adjourned. Good job.